All right, welcome once again to another fine Friday morning and afternoon for some of you folks. I am Professor Dave. I am hosting Working Out Loud for you, where we're going to talk about the more complicated side and actually work out loud on some problem areas that we know that we experienced in customer education and customer enablement and internal enablement and all this stuff. I like to say I believe that if you're not learning, you're churning. That might even be internal. That might be a customer. You might be a customer. Being really learning about B2B software is challenging, and we tend to hide our educational materials sometimes. So we're going to open that up. And today, now I am welcoming my friend, the one and only Johnny Tu, here of ServiceRocket. So say hello to everybody, Johnny.
Hey, everybody.
And Johnny, tell us a little bit about yourself, your role here at ServiceRocket, and we're definitely going to get into it. But just high level, what's your role? How long you been here? What have you been doing here at ServiceRocket?
So I've been here since beginning of 2008. So it's been quite some time.
Wow.
And I work as a technical trainer / instructional designer and content developer, focusing mainly on technical training for software companies that we have a partnership with.
Right. So a lot of cases you're doing that enterprise grade training where, for example, well, I'm not going to name any names here, but you'll do really sophisticated, really technical training, but kind of niching down and focusing in on the customer that you're working with, right?
I might not say enterprise is the right term. Like a lot of the products that we've worked with from companies that are not what you call a big enterprise. Like, should we be naming any names here or?
No, I don't think. Generally, we try to avoid names on the show unless it's someone we're working with. But kind of like I just talk about the space or the kinds of software we're working with.
Yeah, so they're more like on the startup or just beyond the startup stage of their life cycle. So they have a software product that they sell to customers, and we try and help them grow that by providing training to their customer base on that product. So it's not like your big enterprise type company, but some of their customers that we train could be a big enterprise type company.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. Okay, so today what I'm hoping to do, I like to put this in the phrase of like taking a hard right or a hard left turn from where we might normally be. I always like to get inside our own companies. Last week we kicked off the year with Bill Kashard, and now we're coming in and Johnny's on my team. We're building a team together. It's really exciting here at ServiceRocket. So today, let me frame this up by saying I've worked with teams, training teams before. I've led training teams before. It can get really complicated, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do. And Johnny, what the problem we're solving. So we're going to talk about the problem of training, and in those companies, just like you're talking about, you're a startup, you're growing. Now you realize, oh, gee, my customers really want training, or they really need training, and we want to get into the realities behind that, like particularly what's different in you approaching something that's more technically sophisticated than, you're like B2B is harder. B2C, something off the shelf, name it, whatever app, Google apps, stuff like that. Sometimes they're just apps, but generally you're working with harder stuff, and we in SaaS are doing that. And then if we have some time here, go through maybe show me something or show us something and walk through like you're thinking. How do you break down a really complicated technical problem and piece it out and say, okay, I built this course. That's what I want to get to the spirit of today. So how's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Cool. All right. Let's then have fun with this. And I don't know if I put my banners in here, but first off, let us define the problem. Again, I've been this role. I've been in many startups, and I've usually been one of the first education people there. So to our audience, what I'm going to say next might not mean anything. These are terms I would look up though. When I talk about startups or growth companies, organizations in software that are going from zero, right? You have nothing and then you're growing all the way up to a big company. Then you think about things like, unless you're self-funded, you have Series A, Series B, rounds of funding. these are really interesting points in a growth trajectory of a company, because the difference between each one, let's say I got seed funding. That usually means where there's just a few people, right? And we're starting to kick around ideas, lay out what you call a minimum viable product. Not a lot's going on then. We're getting our feet wet. We're understanding what the product is. But when you get to a point where either you're getting money rolling in, you've got enough investors internally, or you've got like a Series A round or Series B. This is where big vendors come in and start, or big companies come in to sponsor you. That's when it gets really important for education. And that's where we're going to talk about today. You landed, if you're listening or watching, you may be that person who's the first person that said, okay, we'll role play. Johnny, hey, you're really great at technical stuff, and you've been working with us for a while. We love working with you. You always do a great job, and you explain things just so well. What do you think about being a trainer for this product? And I think that's the kind of story, your origin story, isn't it?
Yeah. So I probably won't say I have the most kind of inspirational type of story. So I originally, so when I started in 2008, I was actually a support engineer, and we were supporting a particular enterprise integration product with a company that we had a partnership with. And about halfway into the year 2008, that's when the GFC, global financial crisis, occurred. And so that company that we were partnering with, they had to, like, they cut their support contracts, and they were looking to trim costs basically. And so I found myself having to move into another role. And at the time, there were some development roles available in a different team. And then this one particular manager at the time pitched to me, what about becoming a technical trainer? What about becoming a trainer and delivering training courses on these products that we work with? And I didn't know much about it at the time. And I was thinking, like, so one other aspect that people may not be aware is that I was actually still in uni at the time, or university, or what you Americans would call college. So that was my third year of university. And my degree had a program where in your third year, you basically do a year of work experience. And that's how I started with ServiceRocket. So this particular manager at the time pitched to me the offer to be a technical trainer.
That's so
I didn't quite think much of it at the time, but I remember two key points stood out in his pitch. One was you get a better salary, and the other one was you may have the chance to travel. And so that kind of sold it for me a little bit. Although I still don't think that better salary eventuated for quite some time, but we'll let that slide.
Okay, you stuck around, so the travel must have been awesome.
The travel was great once I started to get those opportunities. The first 2 years was a bit of a, like, kind of just tough it out, slog it out kind of ordeal, but it worked out for me. So the main challenge was a lot of the clients that we were running these courses for were in either the US or in Europe. And so that meant the time zones were all fuzzy. So for US clients, I'd be getting up early in the morning, and for European clients, I'd be staying back at night. And there was no work from home back in those days. So every time I had to get up early in the morning at like 5 a.m. or even earlier to get to the office, I'd get a taxi. Luckily, everything was like company paid for. So take a taxi into the office or take a taxi home at night. And,
wow.
So that was the hard aspect of the role to start with. But the good part was that it actually gave you a lot of time during the day to do your regular, day activities. And because I was still at uni at the time, that helped that I could kind of define my schedule a bit more freely.
That's really cool that you had the opportunity to do that while you're in university. You're still learning. What was your course of study?
So the actual name was a Bachelor of Science in IT, but it's basically just a fancy way of saying it's a computer science degree.
That's cool. So it set you up, and that's actually going to prompt me for a number of questions, but I don't want to inject yet until you got your whole story out. So that's your origin story. You fell into it, right time, right place. Yeah.
I should also mention that because of the GFC at the time, there weren't exactly a lot of other openings going around. So I kind of took whatever was there. And
it's like, here you go. Enjoy. It's going to be great. But you stuck it out. And I mean, you've made it for quite a long time in this role, and you've obviously grown a lot. In the short time we've known each other directly since I started, and I'm impressed in your aptitude to pick up pick up new content or new material and go, like, because I've looked at it and I have something for us to go through today. Some of the things you're working on, I'm like, oh wow, now you and I are kindred in one key way, is that I went to uni for complicated stuff. I studied a lot of computer technologies, and frankly, the story that I could tell too that's resonant with yours is, so I used to work in a laboratory. I was a chemist. I got degrees in chemistry, and I'm in the laboratory, but I found what I really loved to do was work with the computer systems. And what I even loved more was helping other people, right? Like helping cells. Bill's big brand, one of our podcasts. It really connected you when you're working in a lab and some other people are like, well, I'm not really computer savvy. I'm a chemist. I don't know this stuff. Can you help? And I was going around helping folks until someone said, hey, we need to do this thing where we implement this product, this technical stuff. And okay, Johnny, I'm going to date myself a little bit. This was the late 90s. And so systems then were going through a transformation like we're doing again today, but now we're going cloud. Back then it was going client servers. Like, oh, wow, you can install this on a PC, and we've gone from mainframe type systems, but it's the same idea. You would have to understand technical concepts really quick and be able to go, okay, I get it. You understand the work being done. And then you come back to the team and go, all right, let's huddle up. This is how we do it. So how about we start on that? Because I want to drill in a little bit more, because I think you're actually one of the best people to talk to about the story arc. Like, I talk to folks all the time, Johnny, who are like, I want to get into customer education or product education or enablement. And they go, I don't know where to start. And I don't know what I would be good at sometimes, or, what's out there. So here we are talking about training, and you told us your story. I told a little bit of mine, but where I'm sometimes worried for all of us, like, imagine I'm new, I'm straight out of uni. I might not have your background or my background either. Maybe I'm from marketing. Maybe I went in business, whatever. Now I've got an opportunity to be like, I'm really good at training. Somebody pushes me into that role. But okay, here's a moment that I experienced, Johnny. I want to see if this feels similar to you. One of the jobs, and I can mention this, I used to work at Gainsight as their customer education manager. But when I started, I was a little bit different title, but my job was to help Gainsight administrators learn the platform. Now, once I got in the door, I'm like, hey, that would be great. This would be really cool, because I was teaching in university a little bit at that time. And then I had this gulp, hard swallow moment where I'm like, this is a couple weeks in. This is hard. And when I mean hard, I'm not just like, oh, click this button, do this thing, read the docs. No really clear use cases on what I'm trying to accomplish. But even worse, and not like I'm not disparaging the product. It's a phenomenal product. But from the end user perspective, learning it was so hard because I had to understand databases, how to join data, how to look for different object sources. Salesforce was in there. I needed to know all these different things. And thank God I had some of that experience. I'd been a DBA, worked with databases. I'd been a Salesforce administrator. But some folks aren't that lucky. So my first question for you is this, and this is just off the cuff, like feelings, your experience, stuff you've done. What is that first thing you think about or do when, okay, I'm your manager now. I'm going to say, hey, Johnny, guess what? We got this new thing. Boom. What do you do then to process that and say, I am confident in myself? Like, I will say this of myself, I'll look at this like I know don't know everything. I know I'm probably the smartest person in the world, but I'm going to ask I'm going to do what I need to do. What is that? So that's where I want to start. Like, think about your processes and how you make technical training easy.
So it's a lot to think about, but I guess where I would start is high level concept. So like, what is this product designed for? What's it trying to, what's the problem that this product is trying to solve? And what are the use cases for it? And most of the products that I've been involved with, there's been a decent amount of high level documentation to get you started. Like most websites will have like some white papers, they'll have some use cases, and they'll probably even have some quick videos or getting started guides. So that's where I usually start with. That's what I usually start with. I'll go through those guides and then I'll set it up. So like if it's a SaaS product, I'll sign up for an account. If it's something you have to install, then I'll download and install it. And then I'll just kind of follow the documentation, whatever they have from there, and learn by experimenting. And then once I get to a level where I'm comfortable enough, I can start to break it down into like what are the concepts people have to know first, and that's where you usually start a training kind of course.
Yeah, so that's first blush, right? That's all right, I've got this big thing. They've given me access, the company I'm working with gives me access to it, or I've gotten a license. I'm breaking it down. I'm looking at the high level. Just to riff off of that, what I always say to folks is, okay, what's the user trying to do? what are they trying to accomplish? Because and I'll use this term that I picked up working with certification folks, is job task analysis is the terminology. I see you doing this naturally, and so many really great trainers and even instructional designers do this. They go, what are we doing? And what are the things I need to know? So then what? So you've got layer one is what's the big picture? What are the things you need to know? And you've looked at the product. Where do you go next to, like, so I presume you're going to start laying out your material.
So what you mentioned there, the job task analysis, that's interesting because I've met a lot of other instructional designers who go through that. They'll go through the like job functions that people do, like what are they trying to achieve with this, and then they try and build around that. I didn't really take that approach initially because the first product that I had to build training for, it was quite a, let's just say, maybe quite flexible in what you can do with it. Like it was designed for a specific function, but you could configure it to do all sorts of other things. And so we had the way we structured our training was that we would show you what this product can do, but at end user level, what you can do as an administrator, would show you the features in a coherent kind of order. And then we would kind of give some examples for what you can do with it. But at the end of the day, it was up to the customer to decide how they want to use it and how they want to set up their processes around it.
Right.
So I didn't quite take that job task analysis approach into in the training that I do.
But it sounds like you naturally were thinking about the end user, the client that you're working with to train. So in that
the first step was always to think of the end user first, because the customer base for training end users is a lot larger than for training administrators. So we'd always target the end user first. And if there was sufficient enough demand, or if there was a significant administration component to that software, then we would look at administration training.
Yeah, and that's where it gets, oops, hit the wrong one. That's where it gets pretty, it can get drawn out. But okay, that's good. And different approaches, I think, are really important. Where I do a job task analysis is really when I have a very clear idea of the roles. So where you started is where I would start. It's, and I hate saying this because I want to get us to a global presence. The terminology that some of us in the US had used is 101, whatever, admin 101. And 101 is like a kind of symbolic course structure that you see in usually some Western countries. It doesn't apply everywhere, but it's that first look, the overview, the beginning, the intro, which frames up how does this product supposed to work holistically, and what are the outcomes? And then I stop and I go, okay, next step. So tell me more about like actual like how would you approach an administrator or like so you've got like end users in some cases where sometimes it's pretty non-technical or it's technical, but it's not like rocket science where you're having to think of a lot of stuff. But an admin, someone setting up a system, installing things, what's the difference there in that kind, building that kind of material?
Well, so it's a little hard without having to name any names, but
I know. We're trying.
So only a couple of products that I've worked with initially had a significant administration component, significant enough that you could build a training course on. And I still wouldn't really classify that as an overly technical product. Like I'll give you an example for like what I consider technical. So if a product, for me, if a product is designed purely for a software engineer to use, like it's a development tool, then that would be, I would consider that technical. So for example, like if it was Docker or a particular web server, then that's a technical product. If it's just a enterprise business type product, like if it was Salesforce, I wouldn't necessarily consider that a technical product, even though Salesforce is extremely complicated if you look at configuring the administration side. So I would consider that more like a business type product.
Okay.
Now, the administration training that I've built have been on products that are more on the side of the business products, like a Salesforce type product. And the way that we approached it was we looked at what we taught the end user. And so we showed the end user all these kinds of features. And then in the administration course, what we wanted to do there was say, okay, we wanted to make it a prerequisite that administrators had taken the end user training so they know what the end users have access to. And then what we want to show them is how do we get them to set up those features for the end users? How do we get them? How can they tweak some of those features and what that would impact? And then you have your typical administration functions that are kind of like common to whatever product you have, like setting up user accounts, managing those accounts, permission sets. So for example, if you have a permission set, you want to teach the administrator, okay, what do these permissions do? How do they impact what your end users can do? So that's what we would kind of go from there.
Yeah, you're kind of getting the lay of the land there for everybody, so they really understand. That's cool. Some follow-ons then. In customer education, there's two things that absolutely drive me nuts, and I've done both of them. And I think as we're building training, particularly getting into the more technical stuff, okay, here's problem number one, and I call it a sage on the stage. Let me put a banner up. Problem one, sage on the stage. I'm experimenting with how this works. So sage on the stage. That is the case where, okay, let's say I'm a subject matter expert. I know everything about this. And, and if I'm a trainer and I do that, then I run a really big risk of being so far advanced that my thinking, because I know everything, is not going to be resonant with my audience, particularly new people to the product. And then I would say problem number two, I can't type today. Problem two is kitchen sink. And what I mean by that is, guess what? I have to do this training. I'm going to put everything I know of in there, and I'm going to go. At first, I was terrible about this, and my trainings were like hours long. Sometimes that's not a nit. Sometimes training actually has to be that long. But for me, the first time through, coming up with, number one, I'm kind of talking over everybody. Number two, I'm throwing everything in. And the reason I bring up both of these problems is this. Again, we're going back to SaaS. We're startup software companies. And usually the person that's in there is like you or me, Johnny. We have fallen into this by merit of our interest and our abilities and sometimes our passions. But we don't often always have that skill set that comes with an instructional designer or somebody who's like getting all this content out. So I wanted you to reflect on that. Are those common things that you've seen like working with others particularly, or you've experienced? And are there any other like traps or pitfalls when you go into thinking about how you build your content?
So the first problem is an interesting one, and I feel like I have avoided that problem mostly
Tell me
because
how.
every product that I've had to train on, like when I started on it, I had no prior experience. Like I had to
Yeah.
learn that myself. I may have had some experience working with it and using it in our own company, but it's like in terms, like I wasn't like someone that had been using it for 5+ years and knew everything there was to know. So that allowed me to take the approach where I would just learn the material that was involved. The first couple of products I trained on, I didn't actually write the material. I learned the material, and there was other people had written the content. And so I learned the material and what you had to do on each particular slide, what demos you had to do. And that allowed me to kind of stay focused and not go off on a tangent. Because I have seen other trainers like who have a lot more experience. And when they get to a particular feature, they get all excited and they go, oh, and then you can do this and then you can do that. And if you click here, that leads to a whole bunch of other things. But usually we structure a course so that those other additional features might come back to a little bit later on. So you'd stay on point. So I guess that was one benefit of kind of being inexperienced at the time to start with.
That's actually a really good point, in that, the best trainers, Johnny, that I've met in my career are those ones that, let's think about it this way. When I think about myself as an educator or a trainer, and I'm with an audience, I have a different hat I put on. And that's my training persona. And in that hat, it's really hard sometimes, Johnny, because sometimes our ego gets involved with us and can take us away. And that's, I think, where the spirit of sage on the stage is. And like everybody wants to be helpful. And when you know all this stuff, and like, I love the story you said. Hey, I've watched this trainer. They got to this point and, oh my God, they were so excited. And it was bam, 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 all these things. But when you go and learn a little bit more, and you do this organically, and I've watched some of your stuff and I've seen how you work, that you're a conduit, you're a filter. Your job is to be that show host that's bringing everybody down a journey. And that journey can't be too much, because if it's too long or there's too many things in it, we remember from learning theory, a human being can generally remember 5 to 9 things and keep them in their head. Me, probably fewer. Self-deprecation is the finest form of art and humor. But no, seriously though, like, I have kids, I have pets, I have work, I'm working from home. I get things jumbled up. I'm trying to process what you're saying, and that's hard. So I think what you're getting to is that you are kind of naturally in that role of, I might have cognitive overload. I can see these things. I don't know this subject area as much as like all these other people, but that's good because now I can condense it down. And one other thing I think that's really important to bring out is the best trainers aren't always the subject matter experts. Why? Because you come in with a beginner's mind, like a Zen term. Beginner's mind is, I'm not overwhelmed with all of this knowledge about the field. I don't know everything.
This actually reminds me of a good sports analogy that
lay it on.
So yeah, I'm a big sports fan. The best players don't necessarily become the best coaches. It's usually the kind of average, middle of the road players that end up becoming successful coaches. And one of the reasons I read for why that's the case is because if you are a naturally gifted athlete and everything just comes so easy to you, you probably found everything really easy, and you didn't necessarily know what the little nuances were in your technique that made you improve. Whereas if you were an average player, you had to work really hard and learn every little thing about your sport or your position that you play. And that gives you more broader knowledge. And that's why they tend to become better coaches down the track.
That, that actually I connect with. I would say I'm into sports to a degree. I actually like to coach, and I never was a very good player, but I coach my son's team. I've coached my daughter's teams, and as you would call football, but American soccer. I spent many years this last decade helping with coaching. I love it. For that reason that I was never really that great. Gosh, it reminded me of another story too, but I'm kind of losing it right now. But that sticks with me. Hubris of, hey, I don't know everything, and now I really need to put myself in a position to ask questions and try to filter this out. That's important too. But that's another good story. Okay, well, let's move on to one last thing, and we don't have to be here forever, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about like show me something, and what the spirit of working out loud is. Let's do something together, and I think we were talking about some material that you were working on. Are you prepared to talk about that a little bit? Could you like give us? I don't want to go like deep, but I wanted to pick a subject area that I didn't know anything about, and just kind of show your mental processes of how you broke this thing down.
Yeah, I could do that. It may reveal a few names. Is that going to be a problem, or
probably blur those out if we need to? If it's hopefully not a problem. Yeah, like, try to make it like general if you can, and we'll work from there.
Okay. Do you want me to actually share screen, or?
Yeah, you should be able to do that. So click the bottom of the icon. Bottom icon says shared, and then we should have some control to show it on the screen whenever you got it in.
Okay. Let me open up something before I start my screen share. Okay. So this is a prototype of a new webinar course that I'm currently working on. And it's on a product called Kubernetes. Some people listening in might have heard of it before.
Love that. So I'm not seeing anything on the screen quite yet. So
yeah, I'm just trying to see where I can start with that doesn't reveal client names or.
Good. Yeah, and we could talk through it and you can look at it too if we need to do it. But the point is, like, what I'd like to know, I hear Kubernetes all the time. We're doing some work with it, and you're in the weeds. And I wondered even if you could give me like a little pitch, like okay, how about we'll do it this way, and if you find some stuff, we can show it. I am like, what's my role? Why would I need to learn Kubernetes? Why are you trying to educate me? And what are we going to learn first?
Okay, so Kubernetes is a platform for what we call container orchestration. And I think the best way for me to explain what that is to show you a little diagram to start with.
Okay,
so
cool.
Share a little slide that I worked on. Okay, share screen. Okay. So to explain what containers do and why we need container orchestration.
Yeah.
So if we go back to what I might say is the dark age of deploying applications, each company had like a server room, and you have to buy a physical server, install it onto a rack, and then you would access that server and run your application on that server. So this is your traditional deployment method. Obviously, that was really expensive. It's really slow. If you want a new server, you have to order it in, and it takes weeks for it to arrive. So we want to do it faster, right? So next we move to what was called virtualized environments or virtualized deployments with VMs. So on your one server, you could run multiple machines in it, virtual machines, and each virtual machine has their own operating system, like either Linux or Windows, and then your applications would run inside that virtual machine. So if you needed to deploy 3 or 4 apps on the one server, you just have 3 or 4 VMs running on that server. And that was made possible by hypervisors. But there's still one problem with that model, and that is that each virtual machine needed its own operating system. And so that meant you had to install a full Linux or a full Windows environment on that virtual machine. And that means that when you spin up your VM, it's a little bit slower, it takes a bit of time to start up. So the next evolution there was to run containers. And with containers, at the surface level, they're similar to VMs, but they're completely different in that you don't use a hypervisor, you don't have an operating system on it. You are using the same operating system that you've installed on your server, on the physical machine, or you can even run containers in a VM itself. And the idea of a container is that it's a kind of a self-contained environment that your application can run in, and it has all the necessary components and libraries that your application needs, and it is fully isolated from the overall operating system that it's on. So you can run multiple containers on a single machine, and they will be isolated from each other. They should not affect each other.
But they're working off of, okay, I'm tracking with this. I've worked in IT before in enterprise security. So what you've just told me, if I can play it back, is old school hardware. I had to have a server for everything. Now and then I can go towards a virtual machine where I had a massive server or a pool, and I can spin these up. Still time. Now we can do containers with the underlying infrastructure still being the same, and this is on top of that. So you're simplifying and make it easier to deploy, and make it probably easier to be secure and efficient, right?
Yeah, so their idea is easier to deploy and develop on. So when you develop for a container environment, you don't have to worry that, because one of the problems that developers have is they have their own local environment where they write their code and run their apps to test. And then when they go and deploy onto the actual server, or like dev environment or production server, they find that it doesn't work because maybe some libraries are wrong, or you've got the wrong version of something. With a container, everything you need is inside that. So you develop in the container, and you know that when you deploy, no matter what environment you deploy to, it is going to work as long as where you deploy has that same container runtime. That's all you need.
Oh, wow.
And it's much faster to spin up a container because there's no guest operating system that has to spin up. So this leads us, so this kind of orchestrated a change in the way people structure their apps. So they went from having one big monolithic application to hundreds of smaller apps, or what we might call microservices. And the issue with having a lot of microservices is that now, instead of when you need to deploy an app, you're not deploying one thing, you're deploying potentially hundreds of apps. Yeah. So we have a concept called container orchestration, where we want to be able to automate the deployment, the management and scaling of these containers. If one app needs to scale up, but we don't necessarily have to scale other components of so let's say, for example, you have a shopping cart, the Amazon type website.
Right.
You might want to, when you know you've got high traffic demand, you might want to scale the product part of the website so that people can search for products and put in orders, but you might not necessarily have to scale other parts of your application. So you'd only scale those containers that are necessary. And this is where container orchestration comes in, because you might have a cluster of machines that you can run all these containers on, but obviously we don't want to have to manually decide, okay, what node should this particular container run on? What node should this one run on? And if we have to scale it up, we don't want to have to manually deploy extra containers and do all the networking around it. So that's what Kubernetes does for us. So you have an app and you want to deploy it into a clustered environment, and you basically tell Kubernetes how many containers or instances of this app I want to run, and it will automatically decide what nodes that they go on. If that node goes down, it'll automatically redeploy it onto a different node, etc.
Wow. Okay, so I get it. I mean, that was short. I mean, we spent maybe 5 minutes on that. Even with my limited understanding of the environment, I get it. And it makes sense. So, okay. Let me ask you a few questions around this. Unless you want to go further, I don't think we need to. So the first question is, okay, so let's break it down. Did you know anything about Kubernetes before you started this?
Not about Kubernetes, but I had experience with Docker from prior projects. So I knew about containers and I knew how to use Docker. And I would say Docker is probably the most popular container runtime out there.
Yeah, okay, so this is one example of, if you are a new technical trainer, would you say then, Johnny, getting experience, like trying to learn about a lot of different things in the space that you're working with, is that what you do, or do you do that by, okay, I get an assignment and I go learn something. Now I've learned that thing, I go into the next one. Oh, this is similar. Is it I think the word is accretion. Like you're gaining experience and knowledge as you go, and you're becoming a better technical trainer because you understand the landscape. Like,
Yeah, I would say so. Like the last maybe 5-6 years, a lot of the products that I've worked with are in that software development, dev tools, and DevOps kind of space. So they all kind of relate to each other. So it definitely helps to have the same set of products, or to work on products that kind of integrate well together.
Yeah, I said that intentionally because I believe that statement to be true. When I started getting into education and training myself, I was doing everything from Game Maker to Unity to the video game stuff to these really sophisticated applications like Gainsight and Azuqua and stuff. When I hit Azuqua, that was where I was really appreciative of having experience using, as a technical person, like Salesforce and being in the back end, doing database stuff, understanding what triggers and things were. So then I would find myself being gravitating to roles in companies to work as that trainer because I had that background and I enjoyed it, right? I'm like, okay, throw me hard stuff. Let's do stuff together. Okay, so that's really good. So when you went to learn this, was there anything that tripped you up in, like, or you found more difficult? Like every time I would expect you go to learn a new topic, there's probably something in that you don't know. And in those cases, what do you do?
So I've been lucky enough to have subject matter experts that I could just, ask questions if there's something that I got stuck on. I guess the main challenge I had with Kubernetes is there's so much out there. There's a lot of material. There's a lot of different docs that you can use. The main challenge was picking and sticking to one particular set of materials. And I actually found that the most logically structured one was actually a free training course that you can access on EDX. So it's run by, I can't remember who developed it. But EDX has a whole bunch. You might have used it before. They have a whole bunch of free versus paid training you can access. And this course, I think, may have been developed by, I don't remember. It was like some prominent university in the US. It's a 14-week course you can access, but you go through the material at your own pace. Unfortunately, with the free version, you can't do any of the lab exercises or anything like that, but you can still see how they structure things, and that was a good starting point I found in my learning
that's really good process. So you were able to go, I found this university course, I'm going to skim through it, find out what I need, pick out the gems. Of course, like now edX, I think, is open source, like non-proprietary. So you could at least take some of the concepts. And in this case, you don't, like, the other thing that you have to think of is that you might be working for a company that has sensitive information. In this case, not. Kubernetes is, I think,
it's open source.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Which means we want to share and collaborate. Sometimes you may be unable to get that. And now in those cases, like you're working with a really, I mean, you could be working with a government body that has a secure, or a company that serves that market, and they have all these restrictions, right? You might be working in the financial sector and have other stuff, and you can't get to that information. And in that case, where I've found I've had to spend more time is with people who know the systems and go, okay, let's say, Kubernetes wasn't open source and everybody didn't know about it, or knew, they know about it. But if it was a product that only one company had, then I would have to set the expectations. It could take me a lot longer. So I'll have to, like, well, do you have training? What do I have to do? If you don't have any training already, do I have to sit down and go through all of your manuals and documentation to figure it out? Who do I call in to help me? Because I don't think and this is a trap that I've had, Johnny, is that sometimes when I've been in that training role, particularly with really sophisticated, complex things, I will end up spending a lot more of my time than I probably should trying to get to that next level of really grokking, understanding and hear what this product is doing. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, because I think that's it's a trap for me, and it goes back to this mantra that I say in education. It's like perfect is the enemy of the good. What is it, Voltaire? Perfect is the enemy of done. You want to have all this stuff. You want to understand everything, but sometimes, at least to me, it's okay to say, "This is where my knowledge ends. Sorry, gang, but now this is where I'm going to defer to a professional or an expert that does it and knows way more than I do." Like, what happens to you when you get in those situations?
Yeah, so I would always, like, if I got asked a question that I didn't know the answer to, I would just offer to follow up or put them in touch with somebody that could help their problem. You get customers in a training course to all come up with that will present to you a specific business problem that they're having, and they want a solution like from that training course. And I would say, okay, I haven't necessarily seen that before. Maybe if you send me your configuration files or something along those lines, I can follow up with them afterwards, or I can put them in touch with someone that can help.
Right. That's good though. And the point I wanted, the reason I brought that up, Johnny, was this. I remember I was at a big, large enterprise company once in their training center on site. I had a partner with me. We were given this massive all-day training, and this was early on when I was doing this technical training on my own. And I had a hard swallow moment where I'm like, I don't know the answer to that. And the first feeling that came to me, and again, I was kind of new to it at the time, was, oh my God, I'm like, people are going to freak out because they don't know this. I have two things I want to say about that. One is it's okay because your answer was perfect. Hey, you know what? I don't have that subject matter expertise at this point. I know who does, or I know where to go. And we're going to connect you to that. Let's keep moving on. And then, but the flip side of it is I do think there's a call to action for us as trainers to sometimes sit down and maybe look through a little bit more material. And sometimes you might have to go the extra mile. I don't know if you've had to do that, but I know there's been times where I've had to dip into a DBA, a database design book or something. I go, I think I need a little bit more education before I start this. Have you had those moments?
Yeah, there's been times where like you have a particular customer that you have to train, and they have a kind of general kind of expectation for what they want to hear in that session. So I might just do a little bit more research and say, make sure I know that extra subject before I go through the material.
That's cool.
It depends on the kind of gut feel. We used to have a questionnaire that goes out for every customer that bought training courses from us. We used to have a questionnaire that goes out that says, "Oh, what are you expecting from this session?" Something along those lines. And some people might say, "Oh, we will hopefully want to cover features X, Y, and Z." And if feature Z wasn't in the course, but that was a big name customer, I might just go do a little bit of extra research on that feature, and I'll tell them, we don't exactly have this in the course, but I can spend 5-10 minutes with you at the end on this and just add a little bit extra to it.
I like that. That's wonderful customer service there, because you're thinking ahead. You're thinking about the customer's needs. I love the fact that you promoted, let's send out a survey. Let's see what they're expecting. And the best training programs are that they're agile, they can add in, they're flexible. But I think that calls in one more thing that I'll use to close out our conversation today, is that spirit of you're kind of leading with your heart and your mind together. You're thinking about the customer first, which is one of the things that you said to begin with. And largely when you get to the level that you're performing at, there's a couple different kinds of training, and this is where I wanted to center. If you're coming in and you're given a script and you're asked to do this training, you could be anybody. You could be a CSM doing training on a webinar or something. That's palpably different. And there's similar skills. It's palpably different from what you're talking about, where often you're commanded to learn a little bit more of the subject matter. What I'm just impressed about your background is you do a lot of your own design, or you do most of it. And you'll take and build your own class, which sometimes trainers don't have the luxury, sometimes don't have interest. Sometimes I've been in that place too. It's like, I just want to train. I love training. I don't want to think through it. But is that kind of part and parcel of the job for you, where you'll do a lot more of the creative task in your technical role?
For the last couple of years, yeah, definitely. I actually prefer to build my own material because I find that I'm a lot more effective in delivering material that I've built myself, because like I know what my thought process on each slide is. I know exactly where to do what demos. Whereas if I'm learning material that other people have built, I find that's a lot harder for me because I don't know what their thought process are. I mean, maybe they have some instructor notes, but that means I have to read all the instructor notes, and you might not agree with the way that things are structured as well. Like I have been through courses before where I'm like, why is this here? Why is this slide here? I wish I could change that.
Yeah, I've been in all ends of that. Like somebody will go, here's the deck, go. I can't. Where's the notes? Oh, well, they were in my head. Really? Really in my head? Okay, that's why we make on-demand content. Okay, well, I have depleted most of my core questions. Again, I think you hit it square on. I love the little Kubernetes overview. That was great. Actually, I learned something out of it. Hopefully, audience did too. And Johnny, I appreciate your time today because it's always good to like open up the covers, pull a screen aside, say, hey, here's how we make everything at ServiceRocket. You represent us extremely well. You're out there to do courses. Hey, if you're listening and you need a technical trainer, we found one. And you'll love to do it. Anything else you'd like to, any last parting words, Johnny? Any sage advice?
Sage advice, or
like, if I was a new technical trainer, it's my new role. What's one thing that you would say is a great tip or something to watch out for?
I think if you're starting out, like, and you mentioned this earlier on, you don't have to promote or set yourself up as the expert that knows everything about the product. Like, if you do that, you're kind of just setting yourself up to fail. Like, what you want to do is convey that, you're there to get them through this material. Anything that's out of scope, follow up, put them in touch with the right people, and I think you'll be good to go.
Fabulous. I couldn't put it better myself. It's your coach. I like your sports analogy. It's, we're there to coach people along and help them through that journey and get them to the next step. So put.
And these days, it's not one coach. There's the whole coaching staff. Like,
yep. Well, you have your implementation team, your developers, all that jazz. We're all there to help. And and one of the people that I co-host C-Lab podcast with, Adam Evermeski of Slack, he says, we're all trainers, we're all educators. And like some of us do it a lot more than others, but we all have to have that spirit. Well, all right. Johnny, this has been fabulous. What I would like to leave out on is, again, next week, if you're watching now, if you're watching live and not time traveling too far in the future, we're going to be talking with Sam Cummings of the Data Plant, I should say. Sam is a friend of mine. I used to work with him. Now he's kind of breaking off and doing some new stuff. This is cool, friends. It's another customer. No, I shouldn't say another. It's a radically different kind of customer success application. I won't spoil it or steal his thunder. Johnny, you'd love it. It's a really cool application. So with that, come back and join us 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and all of the world. I'm not going to do the math in my head. But with all of that, last thing, if you were looking for more information, you can catch me at my LinkedIn here. We're on LinkedIn and streaming on LinkedIn platforms, so it's easy to talk to me. But if you have questions, you want to learn a little bit more, again, this is not an advertisement, but at ServiceRocket, we are very open and we want to have conversations with people. Shoot me a line, go to this page. I can be found there and that will get to me and we can talk more. If you have questions for Johnny, you can hit me up there as well. So with that, folks, thank you so much. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. This is on Friday and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.